You're listening to the AV-IT Amplifier. Each week, we'll feature voices and ideas that need to be amplified in the higher education and pro AV IT communities. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. And now here's your host, Ryan Gray.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in again. And it takes on meaning if it's Wednesday. It's a new episode of the AV-IT Amplifier for you. I am your host, Ryan Gray, and today I don't have a guest, and I'm willing to give you my one excuse for that, which is, sometimes we run a podcast just kind of on your own, and you try and keep up with the calendar, and you got a lot of other things going on, and you're scheduling guests and trying to be strategic about the messages and that sort of thing, and getting things lined up along with your regular life and your regular job and all that. Sometimes you just kind of fall behind, and I have reached for the first time a Wednesday where I don't have an episode ready. There's a recording scheduled between now and the next one, which I'm very excited about and excited to bring you. But I haven't missed a Wednesday since the show started, and I'm not about to miss one now. So everyone, apologies. You've got just me. But if you'd like, I've got a little bit of a show prepared for you today, and I'm going to try not to ramble on too long. So thank you for joining in. So what I want to talk about very quickly are some answers to some questions. And those questions come from a little thing called AV in the AM. And I'm sure probably everyone who listens to this knows what that is. But if you don't already, please go find Chris Netto at Chris_Netto on Twitter. Twitter is where this takes place, or X now. And I do know people that don't like that platform very much, but have it just simply so they can participate in AV in the AM. And every Sunday, most Sundays, Chris will have a series of questions that go out to the AV industry to discuss. And they could be technical, they could be management related, they could be about events or shows or all kinds of topics. Things that as he is communicating and some people all across the industry that he hears conversations going on about. And it's a chance for people to interact and provide their idea and then collaborate on Twitter. This takes place every Sunday morning. And while I'm somebody that I love AV in the AM, I'm usually poking through posts and stuff after the fact, as in my normal life, Sundays are kind of a little more, have been more about extra Sunday mornings exercise and family time. And I don't have as much of the same exercise excuse as I used to run quite a bit. And I haven't been doing that in the new year. We'll see. Maybe we'll get back into it. But it's always something that I like to see. And I'm always looking for ways to participate. And so I'm going to participate today. So what I'm going to do is go through the questions that Chris had this week, which I think are great, and provide a little of what might I have said on Twitter if I was there. And the other thing is, this format let me go a little longer. Sometimes I will have a thought when I see one of the questions or someone's comment, but I don't think I can get that done. I don't think I could get that thought out in just a few characters. And so sometimes that's what keeps me from jumping in, especially if I'm seeing things, Sunday evening or during the week, the following week or something like that. So without further ado, and that intro out of the way, let's get started with AV in the AM. Chris's Netto was, the topic was from film to the workplace. And Chris does always start off with positive notes for the week. And I think that is a tweet that should be missed every week. Some level of congratulations or acknowledgement for people that are getting stuff done or having achievements. So thank you, Chris, for doing that. Question number 1 this week. What can AV businesses learn about risk management and the importance of contingency planning from the movie Jurassic Park? Even the best ideas can go awry. Hashtag AV in the AM. Of course, all of them have to be hashtagged AV in the AM. I will forego that for the rest of this recording. So I saw it was probably Joe Way, and I think some other people did it, but the best quote from Jurassic Park, right, is "You're too busy worrying about if you could to wonder if you should." And I think that is a question, I think, for all AV businesses. But and we is something that my former boss used to say all the time, and something that we that we try and work on with me and my management team in a regular basis is there are tons of things we can do. It's figuring out the things we should do by levels of prioritization, and understanding relative value and opportunity costs that are the most value. I know that kind of doesn't get into contingency planning. But in terms of that, the other thing that really strikes me about that movie is the image of Newman from Seinfeld as kind of the lone tech guy. He's got his multiple monitors and his sort of that tech dude nest set up where you can tell he's coded everything. He's the only one there who knows how everything works. And that to me is the part of it that looks like a place that's set up for success. Doesn't look like a place maybe built on best practices or in a collaborative way. Just sort of, hey, if one person can do it, we're going to rely on them to do it and do it over and over and over. It leaves you totally dependent upon that individual. Often it leaves you taking advantage of that individual, which can end up with where they ended up in this place, which is that individual taking advantage of you being the only one that has knowledge of certain things, say trying to sell things on the black market in that case. And then when something bad befalls them, you've lost them forever. But both of those things kind of go to the theme for me on this one, which is paying attention to the why. And the kind of the overarching theme of Jurassic Park, and it goes to that first quote, is understanding why you're doing something. So if you have figured out how to bring dinosaurs back to life, and your first thought, the why for you doing that is create an amusement park, become famous and make a lot of money, not say conduct science and research and truly understand what we're doing here, it will lead you to decisions that you see played out in that film or in the book that made it, where maybe safety is taken aside, or your time and effort may not be put into the things that are most important if the why you're going about doing the thing is wrong. And I really love how the story sort of, you get brought into it through the eyes of some scientists who get invited, where the owner of the park can't, at the beginning, he can't even understand why they're just not floored or amazed with what he's done. And it's because their whys are so different. And that leads them to look at the same things in a totally different way. So when it comes to contingency planning for your lessons from Jurassic Park, make sure you've got your why in line, and that may help you avoid some of the things that can leave you vulnerable that need contingency planning. Question number 2. What teamwork and collaboration lessons can businesses learn from the diverse group of superheroes in the Avengers? How can they be applied to real-world corporate environments? Do you hire for soft skills, tech knowledge, or years of experience? Choose 2. So a multi-layer question, and probably the discussion of diverse groups building teams and all that I think is pretty well trod ground, and the value of having diverse points of view, diverse backgrounds, and diverse capabilities working collaboratively to turn out a product that's better than the sum of the parts. I think is pretty well understood, pretty well taught, and kind of universally valued. Whether it's universal practiced, I don't know, but it's something that the AV industry struggles with a little bit, being that that a lot of us can be a little homogenous. But one of the cool things of the jokes about the AV industry is that everybody stumbled into it accidentally, and while a lot of us get to it through music or other things like that, there are lots of stories of how people get into AV, and I think that adds to it. But what I want to deal with is that question at the end. Do you hire for soft skills, tech knowledge, or years of experience? Choose 2. And on the surface, that's a very easy question to answer. If I have to choose 2 of those, I'm taking soft skills and tech knowledge, because years of experience is only a proxy for those things or something else. Years of experience by itself is not of value. It is that we are equating years of experience with gained knowledge, gained instinct, gained skill, and the ability to adapt or be expert in a field. So if and my job descriptions and postings do have kind of required and and requested years of experience, because there are some things you just kind of need to have years of experience to develop. But I think it's important to understand that not get in the way of hiring the right person or the best person, as it's really just a proxy that you're trying to use for the skills that you're really looking for. And to that point, the other thing he uses is soft skills, and I'm understand the meaning of the word soft skills. I've always, I kind of bump back on it a little bit because it seems soft skills are like a secondary thing. And I think in my world, those skills of emotional intelligence, empathy, customer service, the ability to see things through other people's point of view, the ability to truly work collaborating in a group, to value people over others, to be invested in group success over individual success. Those would usually be called soft skills. And to me, those are the core of what will make anybody good. And many people will say, I can't teach that stuff, but I can teach technical knowledge. And to some extent, that's true. Also, technical knowledge needs to be constantly changing and updating as technology changes. So those soft skills are often the first thing I'm looking for. But that being said, I do think not only can those things be taught, how they're taught is a key part of it. That is, a seminar that talks about how to act with emotional intelligence or how to build a sense of belonging in a team is fine. But it is only by people on teams, people in the real world living it, because it is valued over other things by decision makers and leaders, is how that actually comes to fruition. That day in and day out, if a group says they value soft skills, they value customer service, but then decisions are made based on, based solely on, say, a small amount of profit return versus truly doing what's important for a customer, the message will be undermined. Those are skills or lessons of experience. Those are skills or lessons that have to be lived, and they have to be seen in action and shown to be valuable for them to go. So don't go hiring based on soft skills if you are not going to value the judgments that people with good soft skills bring to you. And third, when it comes to hiring, and I've said this before, is when I'm hiring, I'm never looking for the best person for the job on day one. I'm looking to try and figure out who the best person in that job is day 365 and beyond, or who's the person that the job that they're interviewing of several jobs in our organization, because they're the sort of person that's going to be growing, improving people around them, and is going to be promoted over time. Making that judgment, people have to be careful because bias can enter into it quite a bit, but really hearing somebody that can articulate how they value learning and growing and how they've been able to do it, especially how they've been able to make others better, is key. Thank you for listening to that. But yes, I would say years of experience, not the one I would choose out of that group for that reason. Moving on, number 3, in the Matrix, how does the red pill, blue pill metaphor relate to decision-making in business, especially when it comes to embracing change and innovation? Is it as simple as one or the other? Again, I think it is a good question, and it kind of begs the answer. But almost every time that someone is presented with a one or the other choice, or especially leaders are faced with a one or the other choice or something like that, it is the fallacy of the false choice. What it usually means is something's been set up in order to predict or create the outcome that somebody wants, because humans, I think, are really overestimate our ability to foresee the consequences of our choices. And that's the only way you can really have that kind of either or, is to say, I go down this path or that path. And I suppose if, say, you work in the railroads, then it can be that way, because a pre-laid track is laid down. And in some cases, there can be things like that. For instance, choosing a major in college or something like that, there can be tracks that are laid out. But in our world, especially now, there are so many forks in the road. There are so many opportunities for things to not come out the way you think they're going to, that our ability to say whether I take the red pill or the blue pill today is going to mean X or Y isn't true. And actually, I think I was on Twitter in the discussion of this. Richard Mitchell posted a little graphic, and it just kind of had two V-shaped, a red and a red and a blue V shape that start at the pill and go out. But because those expansions mean that there's actually a lot of area in the long run that crosses over between the two, and you could actually end up sometimes in the same place, regardless of how you make an individual decision, based on the idea that we usually overestimate our ability to know what will happen if we choose A or choose B in something like that. But I think the key with that kind of metaphor in the Matrix is that, and of course, the Matrix is layered with metaphors, and you can adapt them in any way. But for the purpose of this is an encouragement to see the way the world actually is, your situations the way they actually are, and try to release predispositions we have for the way things we want something to be, the way we wish something would be, or the way it has always been or been before, that kind of put those barriers on how we might move forward, how we might choose to do something. It's those sorts of predetermined things that may make us see an individual as only able to perform certain tasks, rather than to be able to grow into something else, because that is what we've seen from other people or something like that. I think in technology, there is a very kind of there's a thing about the way things have been done in the past as being important and to hold on to, and the valuing of previous success that can get that way, that can cause trouble in this. But the lesson of that Matrix is, if you have the choice, let's do our best to see without preconceived notion what the situations we're dealing with really are. Who are the people that are really involved? What is the opportunity or not the opportunity? What could actually happen? Regardless of what we think should happen or how something should work, how would it actually work? And being in higher ed, there is probably everywhere, but being in higher ed institutions, there's definitely a should bias. That is, we could be faced, and this comes up a lot, faced with a certain problem, and within, say, a meeting called to deal with it. And the first thing that happens is somebody talks about how it should. Well, this should have gone to XYZ committee, and it should have been dealt with as some earlier process, and it should have X, Y, and Z. And it usually becomes a way to sidestep dealing with the thing that you're dealing with, rather than and to talk about a larger systemic problem, rather than deal with the thing that you're actually needing to deal with. And so when faced with those things, I try and make sure we do both. That is, yes, there is, if there was a process that broke down, there was a system, there was a committee, there was an evaluation process, there was some other way that was supposed to prevent this problem or issue from coming up, then that needs to be looked at. And that is valuable exercise. But we can't do that now at the detriment of dealing with the thing that is right in front of us. We have to sometimes handle the urgent and then create the time and opportunity to deal with the things that are important. That is, fixing those things so that the same problems don't come up over again. Leaving that there, question number 4. How does the concept of Moneyball in baseball translate to business strategies, especially making data-driven decisions and maximizing resources? Is there a secret Moneyball formula for AV waiting to be discovered, such as MSP or niche installs? ? So I love, I love how the movie Moneyball was made. I love the book Moneyball. I would encourage everybody to read it. It's a nonfiction kind of look at that period in baseball. A big baseball fan, and sort of the even now the term Moneyball has such a negative connotation with lots of old school baseball people, because it symbolizes what they see as basically dehumanizing the game into numbers. And there is a lot that happens in baseball now because of that. The question here talks about strategies and making data-driven decisions. And I think there's an important thing to understand when it comes to using data to make data-driven decisions is being careful about the data you have. Why does analytics work so well in baseball? They play 165 games. People have thousands of teams, have tens of thousands of at-bats a year. There are tens of thousands of plays. There's such a volume that over time, you can, one, gather the data to find the trends and understand, and two, then there's enough opportunity for those trends, for the decisions you make to come out and have that effect. And it's a game that has a finite area that it's played in, a set of rules that everybody agrees on. Therefore, you can gather data that you have a reasonable opportunity to know you're seeing the whole picture. Most of our businesses, our institutions, our higher ed, things are vertical, our day in and day out lives. There are a lot of things and ways where we can gather data, but we have to be very careful in assuming that we have all of the data. We have all of the angles. We have all of the points of view collected in that data set, because you can make a great decision using data, but only as good as the perspective that data can give you, whether it's a complete set of what you think it's providing, or is it gathered in a way that is not going to provide for you everything you need to know, and therefore it becomes the basis of a not good decision. So keep in mind when people are using, and I'm the first one to say that designing metrics that give us actionable information is key, because it's a way of reducing other biases, of human biases or perception biases, and to be able to take some emotion out of decision making and use hard data. I'm all in on that. Just it has to be done carefully. But the real value, why I really like Moneyball, is not about the analytics part of it, and the story isn't actually about that. The real crux, the real thesis is not that, hey, use analytics over everything else. It was about the misplaced value that existed in that system. It was about the fact that players and people, human beings, were not being valued correctly because of certain factors, because of human predisposition or other factors. And it was the use of data in that case that helped that get stripped away. But that doesn't have to be what takes place every time. Like I said, data and analytics works well in a place where A, you can gather enough to be significant, and B, there is enough opportunity to put that to the test that it could actually make a difference for you. But the misappropriating value, and somebody that, in this case, the main character being put in a place of necessity to question that value and find a new way of doing it, is kind of the real story there. The other thing about it is there's a scene in particular, though there's lots of them in there, that really gets to kind of what I wrote down as the myth of expertise. And I think we'd have to be careful saying that, but there's a scene where essentially, the main character who's flipped and is on board with this way of valuing players is sitting with his old school scouts who have been doing the same thing for a long time, and they just can't see things the way that their leader sees them. And it's based on this idea that, hey, we've been doing this a long time. We know how to evaluate players. If we weren't good at it, we wouldn't be doing it this whole time. And now's not the time to upset the apple cart. And this change you're going to make is actually going to be detrimental to our team, not helpful to it. And the uncomfortableness of when people are faced with that is the security of of sameness, and you're forced into a place where you kind of have to choose change over comfort. And at that point, what does that expertise in the way something has been done become an anchor, not something of value? And that expertise has to be won over not by longevity or process, but by results and by the outcome of those decisions. So it's Moneyball is really kind of the score of really truly what's come next, taking over what came before, and kind of the revolution of when one new idea can take over something else. Question number 5. In Office Space, what insights can be gained about employee engagement, workplace culture, and the potential consequences of a disengaged workforce in a corporate setting? What are the craziest stories you've heard about without naming names? So I'm only going to talk for a second on this because this is a topic that I could actually talk quite a bit about and have in other times and places. It goes to the same thing that we were talking about before, which is the biggest problem with employee engagement and workplace culture is actually misplaced value. And not only when it comes to people, but processes and things like that, if you can really truly understand how to value the way forward, value what works in the long term, and see the big picture, that will, from that place, from understanding that why, you'll make better decisions. And I will highly recommend that the book Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. It's aging a little bit, but the concepts in there are fantastic. If you want kind of a deep dive that is not like a how-to book on creating workplace culture, and it's not about make sure you have what's it in the movie in Office Space, a Hawaiian shirt Friday or something like that. Doesn't do it. It's about the core of what you're doing and how leaders create spheres of protection for people, and that sort of thing. So Leaders Eat Last, Simon Sinek, and I'm going to forego a story I had on the front of my mind because I heard it in the last week, just to say that a lack of empathy for people around you is usually what leads to those terrible stories there. If you don't see the other people in your workplace as human beings with their own concerns and thoughts and problems, and calibrate who you are and what you do to take those into account, that's where some of those horror stories come from. And finally, question 6, as a note, not usually question 6, it is called the Jacobi rule. The Jacobi rule involves the optional question 6, which did come up this week. It is, since it's holiday season, how does John McClane's ability to improvise and innovate with limited resources in Die Hard relate to the concept of fostering innovation within organizations, especially in challenging business environments? Good question. I like it. But here's one thing that I will start off with in my answer, and it is that it's because the question talks about John McClane's ability to improvise, relating to the concept of fostering innovation. And what I would say is we should be very careful about putting those two. That the story of John McClane in Die Hard is not being innovative; he's being adaptive. He's not remaking how something is done. He's just reacting. Innovation is a proactive thing. Adaptation, or kind of that survival thing, is reactive. Now, what it is the story of an expert reactive person, and be based on kind of the skill, ability, and creativity that that character has in that type of situation. And I think we see that as valuable in businesses and in our colleges, in our departments, is that ability to take a wealth of knowledge and understanding as a way, when presented with a short-term problem, to be able to be adaptive and use that skill, ability, and creativity to get through that task. But it is very reactive. That is, the story of John McClane and Die Hard is about just getting through the day. It's not about creating a new paradigm for something. So if we separate out the idea that innovation requires productivity, it's about thriving, not surviving. And by definition, right, Die Hard is kind of about surviving and saving others. The key part about innovation is that there have to be times and places that it's okay to fail, that it's okay to make mistakes. Otherwise, you can't take risks. And again, that's not revolutionary, but it is hard to do day in and day out. It means there are people out there that will see those things as wasteful. If you have a culture, an environment where every act, every decision, every hour of every day has to be dedicated to something that shows return on investment, it becomes very difficult to engage in innovation, because there you're going to have places for testing, for trial, for guesses, for pulling on a thread that doesn't exist. And an example I'll give where we are is we have a position in our department, which is the IT relationship manager, or you could think of it in our world as kind of, say, campus manager of campus partnerships. And in taking over my department, one of the things I did was get a position backfilled on the campus this person worked on, because they were getting pulled into a lot of support tasks and not really being able to be freed up to do what their true job description looked like. And then now that we've been able to do that, we're in a phase of really now reinventing what that job description looks like, because we're having the opportunity to experiment. What are the places that our relationship managers should be spending their time on? Do we want them on academic committees? Do we want them investigating technology? Do we want them involved in cutting edge things? Do we want them helping us iterate in what ways and how? And that, so day in and day out, are we guaranteeing that we're getting the best possible outcome for that person's time today? I don't know the answer to that. The point is, I'm not asking that question right now, because we're in the phase of trying to understand where the long-term value is, because in that case, we're far better off putting this time and effort, knowing that we need to experiment around with it in order to identify where it can be most valuable in the long term, and then go there. And, over the course of 3 or 5 years, you'll get far more out of it by ensuring that you're cutting down the trees in the correct forest, instead of just cutting down whatever tree is right in front of you, to mix another Covey metaphor in. So die hard, not reactionary, not being proactive, and make sure you have spaces truly for people to spend time on something that may not lead to anything, if you want to have true places for innovation to happen. And then the last is that I would add to that, and it's way off the topic of the movie, is that innovation has to require you to be able to kill what may be working for you. Two of the standard examples of this are Netflix, right? So Netflix goes to streaming, and that is going to absolutely kill their disc by mail service. But they had no problem doing it, because the future wasn't going to be disc by mail. And so they had to be willing to kill the thing that was making them money today in order to ensure they can continue making money tomorrow. In a way that, it's a good example that in a way that Blockbuster wasn't willing to do before them. And one of the other ones is the iPhone, which is, is used as an example in so many ways, right? But what did the iPhone do? It absolutely killed the iPod. It was supposed to kill the iPod, because resting on the idea that you have something that is highly successful, it is the way it is the industry standard, and then can leap from there to, and always will be wrong. And I know that's a weird lecture coming from me, someone who works in the public sector, but we try and bring the same thing to every area of the college that we have influence on. And that is, if we are not always beginning with the end in mind, not to steal another Covey, but thinking today about where we need to be 5 years from now, then we're already behind, especially when that means not only do things have to be very different, but we will probably actively subvert something that may be very successful for us today in order to be successful tomorrow. And that can be a really difficult thing for managers and leaders to do, because it can, to the risk averse, it can really seem same thing like it's non-productive. So there's Ryan's short lecture on the term innovation. So again, if someone had listened all the way through this, that is awesome, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the people who do tune into the podcast, and seeing kind of a little slow and sure and steady increase in listenership. I hope that some people find it valuable. I love doing it, and I will apologize that I did not have a guest to bring you today, but over the break, I'll be redoubling my efforts on lining things up for the future, continuing to look for and find voices to bring. And if anybody out there has their voice they think would be good for this podcast, or knows someone who should be, if I hear that go out, again, that's not a very good set of data for me to be using on that. So thank you for tuning in, the AVIT Amplifier, and we will be back with you next Wednesday with a new guest that you will want to hear from, we promise.
Thank you for listening to the AVIT Amplifier. Join us again for next week's episode when we'll welcome a new guest who you'll want to hear from. We promise. Your host has been Ryan Gray. He's on the tweeters at Ryan_A_Gray, or find him on LinkedIn to connect. Please subscribe and give the show a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. The views expressed here are not necessarily those of our respective institutions, employers, or sponsors. Everyone hang in there, go easy, and we'll be back next week.